The silence of deep space was heavy and cold, but for the crew of the alien flagship Iron Vanguard, it was a comfortable silence. They were the strong arm of the galactic hegemony, the rulers of 1,000 stars. They brought order to chaotic worlds. Today, their mission was simple. They were here to judge Earth. High Praetor Vex stood on the bridge. He was tall, with skin that looked like polished chrome and eyes that glowed with a soft blue light. He looked down at the blue and green planet spinning below them. To him, it looked small. It looked weak. He had read the reports. The humans of Earth fought constantly with each other. They split atoms for energy but used the same science to build bombs. They were a level 0 civilization, loud and dangerous but ultimately harmless to a power like the hegemony. "The target is locked," a voice said from the navigation pit. It was a smaller officer, moving quickly over a holographic map. "The planetary shield is non-existent. Their primitive satellites are blind to our cloaking systems." Vex nodded slowly. He did not like to destroy civilizations, but the hegemony had rules. A species that was too violent could not be allowed to travel to the stars. They would only bring war. "Prepare the broadcast," Vex ordered. "Let them know why the judgment has come." On the planet below, billions of people were waking up or going to work. They had no idea that their future hung by a thread. In the city of Seoul, deep inside a fortified bunker known as the Central Defense Hub, the mood was far from comfortable. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of large computer screens. Red warning lights flashed on the walls, painting the faces of the soldiers in a grim shade. John sat in the main command chair. He was a tired man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many simulations of world-ending scenarios. Today, it was not a simulation. He watched the main screen as static noise suddenly cleared, replaced by the towering image of Praetor Vex. "People of Earth," Vex's voice boomed, shaking the speakers in the bunker. It was a voice that sounded like it came from a metal god. "This is the galactic hegemony. Your civilization has been observed. Your history is stained with war. Your potential for chaos is too great. You are a danger to the galaxy." John tightened his grip on the arms of his chair. Beside him, a young woman named Lisa was typing furiously on her keyboard. She was the communications lead. Her fingers flew across the keys, trying to trace the source of the signal, but she already knew it was hopeless. They were using technology humans didn't understand. "You have 12 standard hours," Vex continued. "You will dismantle all your military forces. You will surrender your leaders to our custody for re-education. If you refuse, we will initiate the penalty. We will bombard your planet from orbit until your civilization returns to the Stone Age. The clock starts now." The screen cut back to black. The silence in the bunker was deafening. "Is that real?" a soldier in the back asked, his voice shaking. "Can they really do that?" Lisa looked up from her screen. Her face was pale. "John, the sensors are picking up a massive energy signature in high orbit. It's a blockade. There are hundreds of ships up there, maybe thousands. We are trapped." John stood up. He walked to the large tactical map on the wall. It showed Earth in the center, with red dots swarming around it. The situation looked bad. It looked hopeless. "They have us surrounded," John said, his voice calm. "They have the technology to wipe us out without ever stepping foot on the ground. We can't fight them with nukes," Lisa said, turning her chair to face him. "I just ran the simulations. Our missiles are too slow. Their point defense systems shoot them down before they even leave the atmosphere. We throw a rock, they catch it and throw it back harder. John put his hands on the table, leaning over the map. He looked at the continents. He looked at the oceans. He looked for a way out that didn't involve total surrender. He remembered the briefing he had attended years ago, a secret file passed down from generals before him. It was a legend, a ghost story told in the military, but right now, a ghost story was better than nothing. What about the other option? John asked quietly. Lisa froze. She looked around the room to make sure no one else was listening closely. The restricted zone, you know, that's just a rumor, John. Old science fiction stories. There is no secret weapon in the desert. The sensors are jammed right now, John said, pointing to a blank spot on the digital map of the Gobi Desert. Why is that sector always dark? We have satellites everywhere else, but the Gobi, it's always glitchy. Why? Interference, Lisa suggested, though she didn't sound sure. Or maybe something is hiding there, John said. He remembered the code name. ZEUS. It was a word whispered in panic by the previous commander before he retired. He had said, if the sky falls, wake the sleeper. John walked to the secure red phone on his desk. It was a direct line to the orbital defense platforms, the few weapons Earth had left in space. Usually, those platforms were for shooting down rogue asteroids or incoming missiles. They were not designed for offense. What are you doing? Lisa asked, standing up. John, if you fire at them, they will start the bombardment immediately. I'm not firing at them, John said. He picked up the receiver. He had to authorize the strike himself. There was no time to call the president. There was no time for a vote. If he was wrong, they died. If he did nothing, they died anyway. I am firing at us, John said. Lisa stared at him. What? The Gobi Desert, John said, his eyes locked on the map. Sector 4. Coordinates 34. The restricted zone. He spoke into the phone. This is Commander John. Authorization code Alpha Black 0. Target the Gobi Desert, full power. Repeat, full power strike on our own soil. The officer on the other end of the line hesitated. Sir, that will create a crater a mile wide. There is nothing there but rocks and sand. Do it. John shouted. That's an order. Outside the atmosphere, the Iron Vanguard floated majestically. Vex watched the countdown timer. 10 hours remaining. He felt a sense of pity for the creatures below. They were like insects arguing over a crumb. They would learn, or they would perish. Suddenly, a spike of energy appeared on the monitors. Sir! The tactical officer shouted. The humans are firing a weapon. Vex smiled without humor. Foolish. They shoot at the sky with their sticks. No, sir, the officer corrected, confusion in his voice. The beam is not aimed at us. It is aimed, down. They are firing at their own planet in the northern hemisphere. Vex turned his glowing eyes to the view screen. A bright lance of light shot from one of Earth's primitive defense platforms. It burned through the atmosphere with a hiss and crashed straight into the yellow sands of the vast Gobi Desert. A massive explosion followed. Dust and rock flew miles into the air. A shock wave rippled across the desert, flattening dunes. They have surrendered to madness, Vex said, shaking his head. Destroy their platform. End this farce. But as the dust began to settle, something strange happened. The dust cloud didn't just drift away. It seemed to be pulled back toward the ground, as if sucked in by a vacuum. Then, the ground itself began to shake. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a rhythm. A heavy, metallic beat. Thump. 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 In the bunker, the lights flickered. Lisa watched the seismograph. The lines were going crazy. "John," she whispered. "The energy readings, they are rising from the impact site. It's not radiation. It's something else." John watched the screen, holding his breath. "I know," he said. "I hoped I was wrong, but a part of me hoped I was right." In the Gobi Desert, the explosion had blown away centuries of sand and camouflage. It had revealed a lid. A lid made of a metal that hummed with power. And now, the lid was opening. The aliens in the sky laughed at the humans for bombing themselves, but the laughter would not last. They had poked the bear, and the bear was waking up. The dust cloud over the Gobi Desert was enormous, looking like a giant brown bruise on the skin of the planet. From the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, High Praetor Vex watched the spectacle with a mixture of confusion and amusement. To him, it looked like the final act of a desperate and foolish species. He had seen civilizations destroy themselves before, usually with nuclear fire or biological poisons, but he had never seen a species bombard their own empty desert just hours before an invasion. "The energy spike is fading, sir," the tactical officer reported, his fingers dancing over the glowing interface. "The human laser has ceased firing. Impact confirmed, the crater is approximately 4 miles wide." Vex nodded, satisfied. "It appears their desperation has driven them to madness. Perhaps they hoped to hide something in the sand, or perhaps they simply wished to destroy their own history before we arrived. It does not matter. Our fleet remains untouched." The Praetor turned his attention back to the countdown clock. 11 hours remained. He decided to ignore the desert incident entirely. It was a distraction, nothing more. The humans were broken. They were lashing out like a trapped animal that chews off its own leg to escape the trap. But there was no escape from the hegemony. "Maintain the blockade," Vex ordered. "Prepare the landing barges for the initial occupation wave once the surrender deadline passes. I want their leaders in chains within the day." However, down on the surface, the situation was far from under control. In the Central Defense Hub in Seoul, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The air smelled of ozone and cold coffee. The soldiers at their stations were shifting nervously in their seats, their eyes darting between the blank screens and the sweating commanding officers. Lisa sat at her terminal, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was staring at the seismic data. The initial explosion had been violent, a massive release of energy that had registered on sensors as far away as Europe. But now, the readings were changing. The chaotic spikes of an explosion were smoothing out, turning into a rhythmic, pulsing pattern. It looked like a heartbeat. "John," Lisa said, her voice trembling slightly. "You need to see this." John walked over to her station, leaning heavily on the edge of her desk. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He focused on the monitor where a blue line graph was jumping up and down in perfect intervals. "What is it?" John asked. "Is it aftershock?" "No," Lisa said, shaking her head. "Aftershocks are random. This is structured. It's artificial. And look at the electromagnetic field readings." She tapped a key, bringing up a second screen. It showed a map of the world with a swirling vortex of color over the Gobi region. The colors were shifting from red to a deep, violent purple. "The M field in that sector is off the charts," Lisa continued, her fingers flying as she tried to filter the noise. It's not just electricity. It's like a radio signal, but 1,000 times stronger. And it's not broadcasting sound. It's broadcasting a carrier wave. Can we translate it? John asked. I'm trying, Lisa said. But the code is incredibly complex. It doesn't match any human encryption standards. It's not Russian, not Chinese, not any of our old codes. It's alien. Or at least, it's not from this time. Just then, the ground beneath the bunker shook. It wasn't a violent quake, but a low rumble that vibrated the floor plates. Coffee cups rattled on desks, and the lights overhead flickered dangerously. The hum coming from the ventilation system seemed to rise in pitch, harmonizing with the rumble from deep underground. What was that? A young guard shouted, reaching for his rifle as if the floor itself were an enemy he could shoot. Calm down, John commanded, his voice cutting through the rising panic in the room. Stay at your stations. Nobody leaves? He turned back to Lisa. Tell me about the crater site. Did the satellites get any visual through the dust? Lisa typed in a command. I'm trying to access the thermal imaging. The dust is too thick for optical cameras, but heat can penetrate it. A new image appeared on the main screen. It was a ghostly green and orange view of the impact zone. Where the desert should have been hot from the laser strike, the image showed something impossible. The center of the crater was not molten rock. It was cold. It was absolutely zero. The heat was being sucked away, absorbed by something massive beneath the sand. The heat is being drained, Lisa whispered. Whatever is down there, it drank the laser. High above the planet, the mood on the alien ship was shifting from arrogance to annoyance. Vex watched the dust cloud with a frown. The sensors on his ship were far more advanced than anything the humans possessed, and they were picking up readings that made no sense. Report, Vex barked. Sir, the thermal variance on the surface is anomalous, the science officer replied. The impact site should be cooling down, but the energy isn't dissipating into the atmosphere. It is being channeled downward. Deep into the crust. Downward, Vex asked, stepping closer to the viewport. Show me the subsurface scan. A hologram appeared in front of him, showing a cross-section of the Earth's crust. The rock layers looked solid until they reached a depth of 2 miles. There, the scan turned into static. But the static wasn't random noise. It was shaped. It was a perfect geometric shape, vast and dark, hiding beneath the rock like a cyst. Is that a natural formation? Vex asked, though he knew the answer. No, sir, the officer said, his voice filled with dread. The geometry is artificial. It is a structure. And it is waking up. Vex felt a chill run through his artificial body. The hegemony had conquered thousands of worlds. They had seen the ruins of dead empires and the fortresses of primitive kings. But they had never encountered something like this on Earth. Earth was supposed to be a backwater, a mud ball filled with violent apes. They were not supposed to have hidden megastructures buried miles underground. Scan the structure for weapons, Vex ordered. I can't, sir, the officer stammered. The interference is too strong. The energy output is rising exponentially. It's exceeding the output of our flagship. Back in the bunker, the monitors suddenly went black. The red warning lights stopped flashing. For a second, everything was silent. Then, the main screen flickered to life. It wasn't showing the alien fleet anymore. It was showing a direct feed from the Gobi Desert. The dust was clearing, blown away by a sudden, artificial wind. The feet showed the crater. In the center, the sand had been blown away to reveal something black. It was metal, blacker than the night sky, smooth and seamless. It was a lid, a massive circular door that was beginning to slide open. As the door moved, it revealed a shaft that went down into the darkness of the planet. And from that shaft, a light began to shine. It wasn't the warm yellow light of the sun, nor the harsh blue light of a laser. It was a cold, electric blue light that pulsed with power. The sound in the bunker changed. The hum of the computers faded, replaced by a low, resonant tone that came through the floor and the walls. It vibrated in their chests. It felt ancient. It felt heavy. "John," Lisa said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "I think we found the Guardian." John stared at the screen, watching the massive metal doors finish their rotation. The hole in the ground was big enough to swallow a city. From the depths of the earth, a massive shape began to rise. It was slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. It was the sound of a lever being pulled that had been rusted shut for 10,000 years. "We didn't dig it up," John said, a strange sense of calm washing over him. "We knocked on the door. And now, someone is answering." On the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, the alarms began to scream. The energy readings from the planet were climbing so high they were breaking the sensors. "Shields up!" Vex roared, his arrogance gone. "Target that opening. Fire everything." The alien fleet reacted instantly. Hundreds of plasma cannons turned toward the Gobi Desert. They fired a barrage that would have turned a continent into glass. The beams screamed through the atmosphere, aimed directly at the rising shape. But they were too late. The energy field rising from the ground wasn't just a signal. It was a shield. The plasma bolts hit the blue light and dissolved, disappearing like snow in a furnace. The shape in the desert continued to rise, ignoring the fire of the stars. It was a head, a metal helmet, followed by shoulders the size of mountains. The giant was born. The giant emerged from the earth like a mountain coming to life. It was a machine of such immense size that the human mind struggled to understand it. From the feet planted firmly in the Gobi Desert to the head that now rose above the clouds, it stood miles tall. Its body was made of a black metal that seemed to drink the sunlight, making the Titan look like a shadow cut out of the sky. But where the black metal ended, veins of glowing blue energy pulsed, like rivers of lightning flowing under its skin. On the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, the silence was absolute. The crew of alien warriors, who had conquered 1,000 worlds without breaking a sweat, stood frozen. They looked out the viewports at the shape that had risen from the primitive planet below. It was higher than their ship. It was higher than the atmosphere. Its shoulders bumped against the lower orbiting satellites, knocking them aside like pebbles on a beach. That is impossible," the science officer whispered. His hands hovered over his controls, trembling. "It does not match any known galactic architecture. It is not hegemonic. It is not Kriller. It is unknown." High Praetor Vex stared at the screen. His glowing eyes narrowed. He was a creature of logic and order. He believed the hegemony was the peak of power in the galaxy. Seeing something that defied his understanding made him angry. Fear was a weakness he did not allow himself to feel, so he replaced it with rage. "It is a machine," Vex spat, his voice echoing through the metal room. "It is just scrap metal and bolts. And scrap metal can be melted." He slammed his fist onto the armrest of his chair. "All batteries, target the chest. Fire the main cannons. Destroy it before it fully activates." The Iron Vanguard was the most powerful ship in the fleet, a spear of death and technology. It obeyed Vex's command instantly. The massive forward cannons of the flagship glowed with a terrible red heat. They charged up, gathering energy from the ship's core, and then released it all at once. Two beams of pure destruction, thick as towers and hotter than a star, shot down from the sky. They screamed through the atmosphere, burning the air, leaving trails of fire in the sky. They slammed directly into the chest of the giant Titan. The explosion was blinding. It created a cloud of fire and smoke that expanded for miles, swallowing the upper body of the machine. The shock wave flattened the remaining dunes of the Gobi Desert for hundreds of miles around. In the bunker in Seoul, the screens went white with static as the cameras were overwhelmed by the brightness. Lisa gasped, shielding her eyes, even though the light was only on a screen. John didn't flinch. He just kept watching. "It didn't move," John said, his voice barely a whisper. "It didn't even try to dodge." "It must be destroyed," Lisa said, her voice filled with fear. "Nothing can survive a direct hit from their main weapons." The smoke began to clear. It drifted away on the wind, dispersing slowly. The tactical officers on the alien ship leaned forward, waiting to see the twisted wreckage of the giant machine. They wanted to see the broken metal, the proof that their power was absolute. But as the smoke vanished, the crew of the Iron Vanguard let out a collective gasp of horror. The giant was still standing. It had not moved an inch. The black metal of its chest was not even scorched. The blue veins of light glowed as brightly as before. The most powerful weapon in the hegemony fleet had done nothing. It was like a child throwing a pebble at a tank. Vex stood up, he gripped the railing of his command deck until his metal fingers bent the metal. "Fire again!" he screamed. "Fire everything! Do not stop until it is dust." Around the flagship, the rest of the hegemony fleet woke from their trance. They opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts, lasers, and missiles rained down on Earth. It was a storm of fire meant to cleanse a planet. All of it focused on the single figure standing in the desert. The air around the Titan turned into a furnace. The desert sand beneath its feet turned to glass. The noise was deafening, a constant roar that shook the bones of the planet. Inside the bunker, the lights flickered and died. The emergency red lights kicked on, bathing the room in a bloody glow. The rumbling of the bombardment was so loud that the walls cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They are going to break the planet to kill it," Lisa shouted over the noise. She was typing frantically, trying to keep the communications online. "John, if we don't do something, the shock waves will kill everyone on this half of the continent." "We aren't doing anything," John said. He stood in the red light, looking at the screen that was barely holding onto the feed from the desert. "We did our part. We woke it up. Now, we watch." On the screen, the bombardment continued. The giant was completely hidden by a sphere of exploding energy. The force being unleashed was enough to crack the moon. But the sphere didn't expand. It stayed tight around the machine, as if an invisible wall was holding all that destruction back. And then, the bombardment stopped. It didn't stop because the aliens ran out of ammo. It didn't stop because Vex ordered a ceasefire. It stopped because the giant moved. The feed on the screen showed the giant raise its right hand. It was a slow motion, heavy and deliberate. As the hand rose, a wave of blue light pulsed out from the metal body. This wave moved faster than sound. It hit the incoming plasma bolts and missiles. The energy didn't explode, it simply vanished. The blue wave neutralized the alien weapons, turning the dangerous plasma into harmless sparks that faded like fireworks in the daylight. Then, the giant opened its eyes. They were not human eyes. They were solid plates of glowing crystal, set deep into the metal face. When they lit up, they shone with a light that was colder and harsher than the alien beams. Two beams of blue light shot from its eyes, cutting through the smoke and the remaining fire, piercing the void of space and striking the Iron Vanguard directly. The alien flagship didn't explode. It just went dead. Its shields collapsed instantly. Its engines flickered and died. The lights on the hull went dark. The beam from the giant's eyes held the ship in place, pinning it against the blackness of space like a butterfly on a board. The entire bridge of the alien ship plunged into darkness. Emergency alarms began to wail, a mournful sound. Vex stood in the dim red light of the emergency floor strips. He looked around at his crew, who were panicking. "Report!" Vex yelled, but no one answered. "Shields are gone," the helmsman cried, his voice cracking. "Main power is offline. We are drifting. We are dead in the water." In Seoul, the silence was even heavier than the noise had been. The crew of the defense hub watched the main screen. They saw the massive alien ship, the terrifying symbol of their oppression, floating helplessly in the sky. They saw the giant standing on the ground, its eyes still locked on the enemy. "It stopped them," Lisa said softly. She couldn't believe her eyes. "One shot. It took out their shields and engines with one look." "It's not just a weapon," John said. He crossed his arms, a small smile finally appearing on his face. "It's a judge. And it just found them guilty." The giant lowered its hand but kept its eyes glowing. The blue veins on its body pulsed faster, brighter. It was charging up for something else. The air around the machine crackled with static electricity. Lightning began to arc from the metal body to the ground, scorching the glass sand. The giant didn't look like a mindless beast. It looked calm. It looked patient. It had waited under the ground for thousands of years, and it could wait a few more minutes to finish the job. John looked at the red light on the phone, thinking about the rest of the world. The governments, the armies, the people hiding in their homes. They were all afraid. They thought the end had come. "Get me the global broadcast," John said to Lisa. "All channels. I want to talk to Vex. I want to talk to the galaxy." Lisa nodded, her fingers shaking with adrenaline. "You're live, sir." John leaned into the microphone. He didn't need to shout. The whole world was listening. The aliens were listening. "This is Commander John of Earth," he said, his voice steady. "You told us we were level 0. You told us we were weak. You came here to bring us a penalty. But you forgot the first rule of this planet. Don't step on the ants unless you know if they have a big brother." On the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, Vex heard the voice over the comms system. He looked out at the giant, which now blotted out the stars. For the first time in his long life, High Praetor Vex felt true terror. The penalty was coming, but it wasn't coming for the humans. It was coming for him. The silence that followed the giant's attack was louder than the explosions had been. On the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, the crew was paralyzed. The huge screens that usually displayed the glory of the hegemony fleet were now dark, showing only error messages and red warning lights. The air recycling system hummed, a lonely sound in the dead ship. High Praetor Vex stood frozen near the command rail. His pride was shattered, replaced by a cold, creeping fear that he had never felt before. He looked out the viewport at the blue planet below. The giant, that titan of black metal and blue light, was still staring at them. Its eyes were like two suns, pinning the flagship in place. "Shields are at 0%, the tactical officer whispered, his voice shaking so badly he could barely speak. "Engine output is critical. Life support is running on emergency batteries." Vex turned to the helm, his face twisted in anger to hide his fear. "Why are we sitting here?" he roared. "Engage the warp drive. Get us out of this system. Jump to the nearest nebula." The helmsman frantically typed commands into his dead console, smashing buttons that refused to light up. "I can't, sir. The warp core is offline. The energy beam from the machine, it fused the drive coils. We are drifting. We have no propulsion." Vex slammed his fist onto the console. "Then fire the maneuvering thrusters. Turn us around. Use the auxiliary engines." "Thrusters are responding," the helmsman said after a long pause. "But they are weak. It will take 20 minutes to turn the ship." "Do it!" Vex screamed. "I will not be destroyed by mud dwellers." Down on the surface, in the central defense hub, John watched the tactical map with a look of intense focus. The red dots representing the alien fleet were moving erratically. They were confused. "They are trying to run," Lisa said, reading the data streams. "The flagship is turning its broadside. I think they are preparing to open a jump gate, but without their main engines, it will take time." "They won't get the time," John said calmly. He looked up at the main screen, where the giant, ZEUS, stood motionless in the desert. It was waiting, watching the alien ship like a hawk watches a mouse. "ZEUS hasn't finished yet." Suddenly, the giant moved. It didn't walk. The ground shook too much for that. Instead, it seemed to shimmer and distort. With a sound like a thunderclap, ZEUS vanished from the desert. "Where did it go?" a soldier shouted, staring at the blank screen on the wall. "Recalibrate the sensors," John ordered. "Look up." A split second later, the alarms in the bunker screamed. The external cameras, which were pointed at the ground, automatically adjusted to look upward. There, in the upper atmosphere, ZEUS reappeared. It was terrifying. The machine now stood in the blackness of space, its feet hovering just above the Earth's atmosphere. It was close enough to the alien fleet that its size was even more apparent. The Iron Vanguard, a ship that was 2 miles long, looked like a small toy next to the Titan. ZEUS towered over the blockade, dwarfing the thousands of ships that had come to enslave Earth. "Oh my God," Lisa breathed, her hand over her mouth. "It's right on top of them." In the vacuum of space, there is no sound. But if there had been, the alien crew would have heard the whine of the massive energy field gathering around the giant's hands. ZEUS raised both arms, palms facing outward. The blue veins of light on its body pulsed in a rhythm, pumping energy toward its hands. The surrounding alien ships, the destroyers and frigates that had escorted the flagship, panicked. They broke formation, trying to fly away from the giant. But they were too slow. ZEUS clapped its hands together. The shock wave was invisible, but its effect was devastating. A wave of gravitational force blasted out from the Titan. It struck the smaller alien ships first. Frigates, which were built for speed, crumpled like paper balls. Their metal hulls buckled and snapped. Engines exploded silently. Wings sheared off. The wave expanded. It hit a group of heavy cruisers. The gravitational force was so strong that the ships were pulled together, smashing into one another in a tangle of twisted metal and fire. Within seconds, 100 ships were destroyed, not by lasers or missiles, but by the sheer gravity created by the giant's clap. On the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, the ship groaned under the stress of the wave. Vex was thrown from his feet, crashing into a console. Sparks showered down on him. "Report!" he yelled, pulling himself up. "The fleet is gone, sir," the tactical officer screamed. "The gravity wave, it crushed the third and fourth wings. We are suffering hull breaches on decks 4 through 10. Structural integrity is failing." Vex watched the main screen in horror. He saw the giant lowering its hands. The space around the flagship was a graveyard of debris. The hegemony fleet, the pride of the galaxy, was scrap metal floating in the dark. "We have to escape," Vex muttered. "Activate the emergency beacon. Send a distress call to the capital sector. Tell them Earth has a monster." The giant, ZEUS, turned its head. It looked directly at the Iron Vanguard. The blue eyes narrowed. The machine seemed to know that this was the command ship. It was the brain of the invasion. Remove the brain, and the body dies. ZEUS raised its right hand again, but this time, it pointed a single finger at the flagship. A beam of white-hot light, thin and precise, shot from the fingertip. It wasn't a wide blast like the I-beams. It was a scalpel. The beam pierced the hull of the Iron Vanguard instantly. It burned through the bridge deck, through the officers' quarters, through the engineering section, and out the other side. The beam hit the flagship's main reactor. In the bunker, John watched as the Iron Vanguard flared brightly. It didn't explode in a massive fireball immediately. It simply broke apart. The ship split into 3 large sections, which then began to drift away from each other. Fires vented into the vacuum, creating small puffs of oxygen that quickly died. "It's over," Lisa said softly. "The flagship is gone." John let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for hours. The tension in his shoulders finally relaxed. "Target the remaining ships," he ordered. "Ask ZEUS, or well, tell the fleet to surrender." But John didn't need to speak. The giant hovered there, a silent guardian in the stars. The remaining alien ships, seeing their leader destroyed and the invincible monster hovering over them, stopped firing. Their lights flickered. On the screens, white flags of surrender began to appear from the surviving vessels. They powered down their weapons. They were defeated. In the remains of the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, the emergency lights flickered and died. Vex floated in the zero gravity, holding onto a piece of metal debris. The bridge was open to space. The air was gone. His survival suit was his only lifeline. He looked out through the hole in the hull at the giant machine. ZEUS floated in the silence, majestic and terrifying. Vex realized his mistake. He had judged the book by its cover. He had seen a primitive world and thought it weak. He didn't know that Earth was a dragon, sleeping on a bed of gold. He had woken the dragon, and now his empire would pay the price. Vex's breath came in short, ragged gasps inside his helmet. He watched the giant turn its attention away from the wreckage and back toward the blue planet below. The machine seemed to bow its head slightly, acknowledging the world it protected. "It is not over," Vex whispered to the empty darkness. "The hegemony will come back. With more ships. With everything." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. No amount of ships could fight a god. The penalty backfired. The trap had snapped shut, but the hunter was caught inside it. Down on Earth, people were pouring into the streets. In every city, from New York to Tokyo, millions of eyes looked up. They couldn't see the giant from the ground, not clearly. But they could see the explosions in the sky as the alien ships burned. They saw the streaks of fire as the invaders fell from the heavens. They knew something had happened. They knew they were safe. In the bunker, the soldiers started to cheer. It started with one person clapping, and then it spread through the room like wildfire. They hugged each other. They cried. John stood amidst the celebration, looking at the screen where ZEUS stood guard. Lisa walked up to him, a smile on her face. "We did it, John," she said. "We survived." John nodded slowly. "No," he said, looking at the giant. "We didn't do it. We just knocked on the door. He saved us." The giant, ZEUS, remained hovering in the upper atmosphere. Its work was not quite done. The fleet was defeated, but the machine had one final task before it could rest. It had to ensure that the galaxy never forgot what happened here today. The silence that fell over the Earth was different from the silence before. It was not the silence of fear or waiting for death. It was the silence of awe. In the central defense hub, the cheering had died down, replaced by a hushed reverence. The soldiers and officers stared at the main screens, watching the giant machine that hovered protectively above their planet. High in the upper atmosphere, ZEUS stood still. The fires of the destroyed alien fleet drifted around it like falling snow. The black metal of the Titan's body absorbed the light of the stars, while the blue veins pulsed with a slow, rhythmic energy. It had defeated the enemy without hesitation. Now, it seemed to be waiting, watching for any other threats. John stood in front of the tactical map. His back ached, and his eyes burned from staring at screens for 24 hours, but he felt a surge of energy. He pressed a button on the console, opening a channel to every remaining alien ship in the sky. "This is Commander John of Earth," he said, his voice strong and clear. "Your leader is gone. Your fleet is broken. You have two choices. You can leave this solar system immediately and never return, or you can stay and face ZEUS. I suggest you leave." On the bridge of a surviving hegemony cruiser, the acting captain hesitated. He looked at the readings of his ship. Their weapons were drained, their shields were failing, and the giant outside was charging up another energy blast. The fear was palpable among his crew. They had conquered many worlds, but they had never fought a god. "Set a course for deep space," the captain ordered, his voice trembling. "Maximum speed. Get us out of here." One by one, the surviving alien ships turned their noses away from Earth. Their engines glowed, and they vanished into the darkness of space, fleeing the blue planet as if it were a plague. They left behind their wreckage and their dead, running back to the galactic hegemony to tell the story of their failure. In the bunker, Lisa watched the red dots disappear from the radar. "They are leaving," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "They are really going." John nodded. "Good. But we are not safe yet. The hegemony does not like to lose. They will come back. We need to make sure they remember this day." John looked up at the image of ZEUS. The giant machine had not moved. It was hovering directly over the Gobi Desert. "Open a channel to ZEUS," John said. "Use the same frequency we used to wake it up." Lisa looked nervous. "Do you think it can hear us?" "It heard us the first time," John said. He leaned into the microphone. "ZEUS, this is Commander John. The invaders are fleeing. The battle is over. We thank you for protecting humanity." For a moment, there was no response. The hum in the bunker continued, low and steady. Then, the blue lights on the giant's chest flashed brighter. A deep, resonant voice filled the bunker. It didn't come from the speakers, it seemed to come from inside their heads. It was a robotic voice, but it sounded ancient and wise. Threat level, reduced, ZEUS said. Primary directive, preserve humanity. Status, active. The machine paused, as if processing data. Subject, Commander John. Request, Protocol Omega. John looked at Lisa, confused. Protocol Omega, what is that? I don't know, Lisa said, shaking her head. It's not in any of our databases. We are detecting communication traffic from the escaping vessels, ZEUS continued. They are transmitting coordinates of the system to the Hegemony High Command. A counterattack is probable within one standard cycle. John felt a cold chill in his stomach. He knew it. The aliens would run home and tell their leaders what happened. The leaders would send a bigger fleet, maybe thousands of ships, to crush Earth and the machine together. ZEUS was strong, but was it strong enough to fight a whole armada? Can we stop them? John asked. Negative, ZEUS replied. Humanity is not ready for galactic war. But humanity is no longer hidden. A message must be sent. Suddenly, ZEUS moved. The giant bent its knees and pushed off from the invisible layer of the atmosphere. It shot upward, accelerating so fast that it became a blur. It flew past the moon, past the wreckage of the alien fleet, heading toward the edge of the solar system. Where is it going? Lisa asked, tracking the machine on the long-range sensors. It's stopping at the edge of the system, John said, watching the map. Why there? On the screen, ZEUS came to a halt in the dark void between Mars and Jupiter. It turned to face the direction the alien fleet had gone. The giant raised both hands above its head. The blue veins on its body glowed with an intensity that was blinding even on the monitor screens. Warning, ZEUS's voice boomed across the Earth's communications network, and simultaneously, out into the void of space on every frequency. The galactic penalty is rejected. ZEUS clapped its hands together. A shock wave of pure energy erupted from the machine. It was not a physical shock wave like before. This was a signal. A broadcast of immense power. It rippled out across the galaxy, passing through planets, stars, and nebulae. It carried with it the data of the battle, the destruction of the Hegemony fleet, and the image of the giant standing over Earth. In the galactic Hegemony capital, millions of light-years away, the rulers listened in horror as the signal overwhelmed their communications. They saw the power of the weapon that Earth possessed. They saw their ships being crushed like toys. The signal was a warning. It said, Earth is not a level 0 civilization. Earth is a fortress. Do not return. After the signal was sent, ZEUS turned around. It began its journey back to Earth. As it entered the upper atmosphere, it began to shrink. The massive metal plates of its armor folded in on themselves. The blue light dimmed. It fell from the sky like a shooting star, shrinking until it was no longer miles tall. It crashed back into the Gobi Desert, right into the crater it had emerged from. The ground shook, dust rose, and then the desert doors slid shut, covering the machine once again. Within minutes, the desert looked exactly as it had before. Just sand, rocks, and silence. John stared at the screen. The seismic readings were flat, the energy signature was gone. ZEUS was asleep again. Is it gone? A young soldier asked, sounding disappointed. It's not gone, John said, walking to the window of the bunker. He looked up at the night sky. It's just waiting. Watching. He turned to the room. Lieutenant Lisa, I want you to create a new file. A top-level classification. Lisa nodded, ready to type. What do you want to call it? Project Guardian, John said. From this day on, the restricted zone in the Gobi is to be monitored 24 hours a day. We never touch it. We never dig there. We just make sure the world knows that we are safe. Weeks passed. The world slowly returned to normal. The alien ships did not return. The hegemony was too frightened, too confused by the power they had witnessed. The rumors spread across the galaxy about the sleeping god of Earth. John and Lisa stood on a hill overlooking the Gobi Desert. It was a quiet evening. The wind blew sand across the dunes. To anyone else, it looked like an empty, desolate place. Do you think they will ever come back? Lisa asked, holding a cup of coffee. Maybe someday, John replied, shoving his hands in his pockets. But next time, they won't underestimate us. They know we have a secret weapon. They know that if they try to bring a penalty to Earth, the penalty will come back to them. He looked at the horizon. He knew that beneath his feet, miles down in the dark, the machine was listening. It was a ghost story now, a legend told to children to make them feel safe. The story of the Galactic Penalties was a failure for the aliens. It backfired spectacularly. They came to conquer a weak planet, but they woke a sleeping giant. Humanity had been given a second chance, not because they were strong, but because they had a friend in the dark. John smiled as the sun began to set. The sky turned purple and orange. Sleep well, ZEUS, he whispered to the ground. The wind blew over the desert, and for a second, it sounded like a deep, metallic hum. The Earth was safe. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. And it all started with a simple decision to fight back, to wake the sleeping giant, and to say no. The humans were small, but their protector was infinite. The backfire was complete, and the stars belonged to no one but those who were brave enough to defend them.